What's up guys, it's Punchy, and today I'm here studying Deepwoken's new legendary weapon with a few questions in mind about how the game can learn from this sort of option and improve for the future. If you missed it, there's a new legendary weapon specifically for the strength attribute. Legendary weapons have been around since the game's beginning, but this one is special for some really cool reasons that we have not seen before. The Imperial Staff is the first ever bow staff stick that comes to Deepwoken, but technically it classifies as a spear. Although the Imperial shares the spear weapon classification, it acts completely differently, which is great to see. That also reminds me that we haven't really seen a legendary spear yet, so maybe that's coming. Anyway, with a totally new M1 cycle, this staff isn't the same as anything else, but you should notice its running attack resembles that of the Skyreap blade. Alongside this, the weapon itself has 3 unique criticals with a lot of moving parts, but we'll cover that in a minute. This weapon as a whole redefines Deepwoken's definition of legendary, which they need to keep doing because this is almost great. This time, they crafted something truly legendary, but there's still some issues. First off, the most important part. So this weapon looks and feels like it's an artifact, a rare weapon that speaks for itself. Something I covered earlier was the special animations that exist for this weapon and this weapon alone. I'm not too sure if they're gonna add any new staff type weapons in the future of Deepwoken, but if they don't do this, the Imperial Staff stands by itself, and that adds more impact to using this weapon. If you don't get what I'm trying to say, let me explain. Although this might be a limiting mindset, keeping something exclusive to its gameplay might raise that weapon itself to unique heights since it's one of one and nothing is similar to it. A recent example of where this failed is with the new Cerulean Thread. Of course, I'm a huge fan of the kunai appearance and interesting crit application, but in reality, it's simply a better wailing knife. People enjoy both weapons, but the Cerulean Thread is objectively the same, if not better, with legitimately double the critical options, so what's the point of using the original wailing knife? This weapon is very cool, but the impact of it being different just isn't there. I'm not saying that the Crypt Blade should be the only greatsword, but if I'm being honest, options like the Imperial Staff being the only one of its kind, or the Curved Blade of Winds being the only dual wield option, makes those weapons very unique. In the future, I hope the Deepwoken devs learn from this design aspect and run with it because I think it's working. With that being said, it's time to discuss its gameplay viability, what it does right, and how it currently falls behind. The Imperial Staff is a blunt spear that requires 40 medium and 50 strength to equip. Finally, Deepwoken has received the strength legendary, but this requirement is both a benefit and an area of struggle. 50 strength as a minimum stat investment doesn't really get you far, even at all. This attribute doesn't really have that much use over 40 if you're gonna obtain Showstopper, but I guess you could go 80 strength for level 5 mantras or 90 to 100 for Million Ton Piercer and Collapsed Lung. Of course, if you're going Star Kindred, that's also a good option. Despite this, the strength penetration bonus isn't terrible, it's actually very strong, but if you're going a minimum of 50 strength, the talents are not good. With that being said, you're also gonna have to use both medium and strength for full viability since it's not a single stat weapon such as a Hero Blade or the Light's Final Toll. Both of these options are extremely powerful for saving stats, and they didn't want to make that mistake again because they're very good. Moving on, some strength synergy with the Imperial Staff is that you'll be doing a ton of damage with Strength's innate pen while also using the pen on the weapon. Currently, the max weapon pen for this weapon stands at 24% armor resistance bypass, which is pretty insane for damage, without even counting the pen you get from talent and strength itself, so it's really good. Another bonus the Imperial Staff gets for just existing is that it's a blunt spear that's the first of its kind. With this, you'll be able to use and abuse every single spear talent. Alongside that, blunt damage is mostly ignored by most endgame armors in Deepwoken, so this is just a bonus on top to increase your damage. Everything about the Imperial Staff attributes are unique and I like what they're doing, but it sucks that the maximum weapon damage is just underwhelming. With a max of 100 strength and 100 medium, you're probably only getting max damage of around 32 or 30 damage, and that is not worth it. With that being said, I do think it's alright because there is way more to this weapon than it may seem, and that makes it legendary. For the Imperial Staff, Versatility is the name of the game, and I genuinely wish that other legendary weapons got this treatment. There are so many options and applications with with this weapon, but it's also where the largest amount of issues come into play, which I will be discussing. We're so close to perfection, but we're not there yet. When doing any crit, the Imperial Staff grants the player a unique visual that no other legendary weapon has, and that's sad. The user gets a glowing yellow crown that lasts for a bit, and it's simply the icing on top that makes this weapon sweet. In comparison to a ton of other weapons, there's a lot that could be done with the use of elemental options or other things, but this stands apart from the rest and nothing else has this. I think in the future they should do more visual effects on the player with other legendary weapons, but let's move on to the gameplay. The first grounded critical occurs when you're on the ground doing nothing, and it's a good poking option that does some decent damage. When this attack hits, you slam into your opponent using the extended form that's good for catching players and ragdolling them from a distance. As of right now, that's all you can realistically do, and there's little capability of comboing off this crit. This critical is effective as a finisher, which is cool, but the end lag is so terrible nothing can be done right after. Although this crit has some flaws, it's really unique to switch weapon forms, which we barely get to see in all of Deepwoken. Next up, the running attack critical is a spinning attack where players whip around the staff in a circular sweep, and I guess this is the first running crit in all of history that we've seen. Despite how it looks, the Imperial Staff cannot be used defensively at all. In fact, it's only used offensively to really follow up on stun targets or after a guard break. Also, we can't do much with the lacking range of this spin, but it is possible to pressure blocking opponents or pulling this out after sending them into the air and catching them on the way down. The damage dealt by this critical is by far the best that we have, but it suffers heavily if your enemy just decides to parry. Since this spin is a multi-hit attack that cancels on parry, there's not really much that can be done after we do it. There's a ton of areas where this critical falls short, but visually I love this. Now, the final and last attack for the Imperial Staff is the Aerial Slam. Visually, one of the most impressive attacks and one of my favorites, the staff itself grows and hits anybody underneath. The hitbox range is fairly vertical, allowing for some cool air attacks and combos from above, but it is super weird to activate. The functionality of the crit works as intended, but there is a period of lag, I guess pause, where the user stays in place, meaning they cannot act in the air or do anything else. Also, there are many times where I jump and do my critical and I end up doing the normal crit, and it's weird. Just like the rest, it's visually perfect, I think, but in action, it almost falls behind. And that's about it. Many lessons can be learned from the design of the Imperial Staff, but I think the new age of Deepwoken legendaries is starting off strong. There's honestly not that much wrong with the Imperial, but it's gotta see some stat changes to end lag and windups to stay useful in combat. Long story short, it's visually impressive and versatile, and we gotta see more of that. I wanna see options, and I love this. But that's all I got for right now, and big stuff is on the way, but seriously, if you haven't tried this, farm and pick one up. Make sure to like and subscribe, and have a good one. Let's hit 80k subs. Thanks again, it's punchin' time.